Hello, my name is Valerie Ahrens, and I am in the MIT program for special education. For this assignment, I read the book Whole Brain Teaching for Challenging Kids by Chris Biffle. I chose to read this book because in the past I worked in an alternative elementary school, and I also recently observed a behavior support classroom, and I observed many challenging behaviors, and as a beginning teacher, my biggest worry is classroom management. Therefore, I wanted to read a book that explores strategies for working with challenging behaviors. The techniques in this book can be used for grades K through 12 and has even been seen successful in colleges. The central premise. The book focuses on classroom management strategies that help students stay engaged and learning throughout each lesson, which reduces opportunities to misbehave. So basically, if the student's whole brain is involved in learning, there isn't any mental area left over for challenging behaviors. By switching back and forth from direct instruction to cooperative learning, students learn as a class team, as a small group or pair, and as an individual. And the book also explains that successful teachers incorporate lessons that include seeing, hearing, doing, speaking, and feeling. So it goes beyond the traditional form of just lecturing in front of students. There are many points made and strategies discussed in this book. However, I'm going to focus on 4 main points that I found very helpful. I do recommend reading this book because every strategy and technique will definitely help classroom management, and behaviors. So for the brain structure. If a student's whole brain is involved in learning, there isn't any mental area left over for challenging behaviors. So when you hear a lecture, only a small region of the brain is activated. So when you think about playing a video game, we see images, we hear sounds, we initiate movement, plot, process language, and you never know what will happen next. And in the end, you hope to be rewarded by making it to a higher level. So the goal for whole brain teaching is similar to playing video games in that they want instruction to be exciting and as brain involving as a video game. Kids can play video games for hours and hours and have no concept of time and how much time has passed because the whole brain region there's no brain region that available to process that. The whole brain is being used to play this video game, which is why it becomes so engaging. So basically, the less teachers talk, the more kids learn. The second point made is the first strategy actually, and it's the attention giver. And this focuses on the class yes system. So this technique can be used about like 15 to 20 times in 1 hour. And it's definitely a technique I would implement in my future classroom. Although it's very simple and it will sound really simple when I give an example, but it is shown to be super effective. So basically, the script could go like this when first introducing the strategy. When I say class, you say yes, class, and then the students will respond yes, all together. However, I say class, you say yes, class, class, and then the students would respond exactly in the tone as I said, yes, yes, or you could use a low voice, class, class, yes, yes, classity class, yesity yes, and so on. And they explain that this could be very engaging and you have to keep switching up the way you deliver the word class to keep the students engaged, and it will help a large proportion of your students laughingly follow directions. So it's a fun way to get students paying attention and following the teacher's directions. The more educational fun we introduce into our classrooms, the more students will learn and fewer opportunities for challenging behavior. So once this simple technique of using class yes is enforced, the teacher will move on to the collaborative learning, and that strategy is called Teach OK. Now for Teach OK, this strategy transforms students into eager teachers. So instead of standing in front of your classroom lecturing the whole time, the class could go something like this. Class, and then the students respond, yes. When I say teach, you say okay. Teach. Okay. However I say teach, you say okay. Teach. And then the students would respond, okay. And from then, you could say, good job. Now, when I say teach, you say okay, and turn your bodies completely towards your neighbor to teach them whatever you just taught them. And for instance, you could say the 5 classroom rules we just talked about. Here are the rules right here, pointing to the sign. And please use gestures while you're teaching your neighbor. And the gestures and rules are something that are discussed in the book. And basically, it's saying that this strategy focuses on teaching amongst peers because research found that students learn best when they are actively engaged in the process and they retain information more when working in groups or pairs. So the more we talk to students, the more we talk during the lecture, the more students we lose. Collaborative learning is great because we minimize teacher talking and allow students to teach each other. So you'll introduce a new topic for 30 seconds to 1 minute tops, and then you quickly say to the class, yes, teach, okay, and then they'll teach that 30-second to 1 minute lecture you just gave. So it's, you can comprehend if the students understood what you were teaching, and it's getting the students talking about it, and they can explore different ideas. And it's really helpful for students who are shy and don't like to raise their hand and participate, or those students who refuse to participate. So basically with Teach Okay, you're presenting a few points, then you teach the students, then the students teach each other the few points, then you teach a few more points, and it's kind of like chunking the lesson. It's a micro lecture, and this is seen to keep kids more engaged because it's quick lessons and the student is paying attention because they know they're going to have to start teaching it to their neighbor. So the Big 7 is the 7 main points that the whole brain teaching focuses on. So I told you about class, yes, and teach okay. Those are the first 2. The next one is the 5 classroom rules. The 4th teaching strategy is called the scoreboard, which would teach positive reinforcement through a scoreboard unified class system. Then there's a hands and eyes strategy. Strategy 6 is called switch, and strategy 7 is called mirror. So although I do not have time today in this mini webinar to discuss all of these strategies, I definitely recommend reading this book because all 7 strategies are so helpful in classroom management and dealing with challenging behaviors. And it also is great for students for just a whole classroom, whether there's really challenging behaviors or not, because it really produces a unified classroom. So one passage that really stood out to me is as following. The final benefit for teachers using WBT is student engagement. Common teacher sayings such as students who fly under the radar and students who fall between the cracks represent those who have learned how to fit into what Pang calls a passive learning environment, in which they sit quietly and blend into the crowd. Pang argued that activity-based learning is foreign to so many students because they have been trained to be passive learners. Pang explained that metacognitive learning with application happens when students complete activity-based learning. In WBT, classroom participation is expected. Often students are afraid to participate in traditional ways such as raising their hand to answer a question because they fear being different than their peers. However, in a WBT classroom, all students discuss questions with partners and small groups to work out problems and share ideas regularly. Therefore, students who participate do not have to fear being different or singled out. I really like this page on page 184 because it reminds me of when I was in school. I was very shy when I was younger and I felt so nervous I would be called on to speak in front of the class. I became what Pang calls a passive learner, and I focused more on stressing about getting called on than the actual material being taught. This made me almost resent school. So I really would have loved this strategy in WBT because in WBT to have small groups or peers work together often, just explaining what the teacher just taught and sharing ideas with one or two people rather than speaking to the whole class. Since other children are talking in other groups, it will not feel like you're singled out because there's so many other conversations going on. And this can help challenging kids who may act out because they're having trouble keeping up with the lesson. A teacher can really focus on assessing if students are understanding, because if the teacher says, class, yes, teach, okay, and there's not a lot of teaching going on or silence, the teacher probably would realize that they need to reteach what they just taught because the majority of students are not understanding. And it basically checks for comprehension. So overall, I really recommend this book to educators. There are great resources online at www.wholebrainteaching.com, and it really makes me excited to try out these strategies. I was really nervous about managing classrooms, and this definitely gave me a lot more confidence going to student teaching next semester. Thank you for watching my webinar.